228 passengers and crew died when the Airbus A330 plunged into the Atlantic while en route from Rio to Paris. At a news conference earlier, French investigators listed some of the problems they'd identified.
They're related to a lack of training at high altitude and manual piloting, and the procedure relating to airspeed anomaly indications. They relate to the work in the crew, weakened by the effect of surprise, and they were related to the absence of clear indications in the cockpit of the inconsistency of speeds identified by the calculators. And there were many messages, but none of them really led to the appropriate procedure being adopted.
Well, Ashish has been looking at the details, and we hear this phrase catalogue of errors, both from the pilots and the equipment, but basically starting with a very simple sort of tube on the side of the aircraft that failed.
The speed sensor, the P2. This froze over, and once that froze over, the plane was on autopilot. Modern aircraft, completely computer-driven. The pilots literally take off and land these planes, but once the speed sensors had frozen over, the autopilot disengaged, and then it was down to pilots, or in this case, pilot error. The pilot was on a scheduled break, the captain. He was taking a nap. The two co-pilots, young men, inexperienced, simply didn't know what to do and how to do it. The computers were sending in the wrong information. They didn't know whether to take the plane up or down. They took the wrong decision to take it up. The plane started to stall. That's an aeronautical term. It doesn't mean the engines kicked out. It just means it couldn't.
The attitude in the air.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. And then it started to fall very quickly.
Now, that's being blamed as pilot error, but clearly they have to go with what the instruments are telling them. And long term, are there going to be questions asked here about how much pilots rely on what computers tell them in an aircraft?
Essentially, what it comes down to, Mark, is what pilots do when they have to fly a plane once the autopilot is disengaged, a plane like this, because they're so over-reliant these days, or certainly that's one of the theories being proposed.
Because they have a little joystick, don't they, to fly these things, like a gaming console joystick.
I mean, there were alarms being sounded. There were alarms, but they didn't interpret the alarms in the way they should have. So to say that, you know, because the speed sensors were frozen, they didn't know what... They simply had no idea how far, how fast, how high they were.
Because there was a storm outside, so it would have been completely dark.
There was a big storm, which most other planes on that flight path navigated around. They decided to go through it or up and above it, and that could prove to be one of the costly areas there.
So where does this leave now the relatives? Because clearly blame's being attached both to Airbus, the plane manufactured, and to Air France, the operators.
This is the end of the Air France and the BEA investigation, the official investigation. There's still a judicial review. Now that will announce its findings next week. There are court cases pending and possibly the threat of manslaughter hanging over Air France and Airbus. But they're trying to apportion blame on each other at the moment.
And the only reason that we've got this far is because they managed to actually get those flight recorders, the so-called orange or black boxes, orange boxes, yeah, from the ocean floor.
Yeah, that took 2 years to locate those black boxes. It was the team involved was the one that was involved in finding the Titanic. It was a vast piece of ocean, hundreds of miles off the Brazilian coast, and it's one of the costliest exercises ever to retrieve black boxes. This is the reason why this crash is so important, is because it completely went off the radar. It was lost for hours. That just doesn't happen in modern aviation anymore.
No distress call.
No distress calls. Lost contact. Off the radar for a few hours, and it was only 6 hours later that air investigators or air traffic control in France raised the alarm and thought one of our planes is missing.
Just to reassure people, however, those pitot heads, these tubes on the outside, they've all now been replaced in these Airbus.
They have, yeah. That was a call that was made right after this incident, this air crash, and that was but it's a localised decision. This was a decision made for the Air France fleet.
Ashish, thanks very much indeed for bringing us up to date with all that. Thank you.